everyone, and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady, and today I will be going over the long-awaited top 10 armies of October. There are actually a few newcomers to the list, and a couple that might actually surprise you. But before I get into the main content of this video, I want to take a quick second to mention everyone that doesn't already know. The channel now has a Patreon, which you can access at www.patreon.com/almostprogaming. The Patreon is to help the channel afford all of these codexes as they release. That way I can do in-depth guides on every army. You can even pledge towards a specific codex if you want that army's faction-focused videos to be done as soon as possible. Alright, enough about that though, and let's get into what you all came for. The top 10 armies of October. Now remember, all of these armies are based off of the top 3 lists from all of the ITC events that happened in October. If you don't know what the ITC is, it's the Independent Tournament Circuit that is run by Frontline Gaming, which is basically the dedicated competitive side of Warhammer 40k. So with that said, let's get into it. Number 10! Blood Angels. Yes, this surprised me too. First off, because the Blood Angels don't have a codex yet, and it seems most index armies aren't doing well on their own in the meta, but Blood Angels was able to scrape by with a couple of top 3 ITC placements. Now take this with a grain of salt, because only one of the 2 Blood Angels lists was an actual full Blood Angels army. The other list just had 3 Storm Ravens and some guard stuff. This is how the ITC considers factions. Whatever detachment you have that is the biggest, the most points spent, that detachment is your main army, and the other detachments are allies. That's how the ITC looks at it. So to be honest, the Storm Raven list I would call Imperium, but the other list was a full-on Blood Angels list, so you can't really argue that. I'll include the list for you to see right now. As you can see, this list is filled with Forge World stuff like the Dreadnoughts, so it won't be too cheap to follow this list, and to be honest, I'd still wait for the Blood Angels Codex before you drop any money on any of these, because for all we know, other stuff that is cheaper might become stronger when the Codex is released. But it is nice to see the Blood Angels finally get some love since they are one of the most popular chapters. Number 9. Adeptus Mechanicus. The 50s robots jump into the list at 9th spot. I've been asked multiple times about this army and how to build it properly, and each time I've replied I wasn't sure because I've never seen this army in person before. No one in my club plays them, or at least has played them since 7th edition. But now apparently they are a pretty good army. Let's take a look at one of the lists and see what they took. Now I would normally go over why each of these units are here and what makes them good, but I would just be talking out of my ass, so I'm not doing any of that. Because again, I don't have any clue on what any of these units do, other than Call, who has super rerolls that rival Guilliman's. So take this as you will, but until I get my hands on a codex, I can't really go over why each of these specific units or the army is good. All I know is that the army topped in 2 different events, so it must be good, and that's why it makes the list. Number 8. Jeanstealer Cult. Like last month, Jeanstealers are still here. They use either Imperial Guard or Nids as allies and get the best of all of those armies. I looked for a list to show you guys, but they weren't available, so I can't even tell you what units did well. But this army has been doing well since the beginning of 8th, and with the Guard and Nid Codex releases, I feel like this army will start to either rise or fall depending on if people switch to full-on Nids or not. Because right now, I feel like the only reason Jeanstealer Cult is even played is because Nids aren't in the best spot. But with the Codex released, the Nids look like they are going to be one of the top armies next month, but we will have to wait and see on that. Number 7. Grey Knights. This is one of my favorite armies. I'm glad Grey Knights are topping events. Most using the list that I talked about in the Grey Knights faction focus video. Lots of Nemesis Grandmasters with some guard allies to fill up the points and to get more bodies. This army hits like a truck and can also take a hit pretty well. If the opponent isn't spamming last cannons, your army is probably just going to steamroll over the enemy. With good psychic powers and lots of DACA, this army shows it's still one of the best out there. Number 6. Tau Empire. Still commander spam. Not much else to say about this army other than the codex needs to drop as soon as possible, because I'm pretty sure even the Tau players are getting kind of upset at the fact that they can only use commanders. You could argue it's the same for Grey Knights using Dread Knight Grandmaster spam, but at least the Grey Knights get to ally in Guard for some flavor. Tau have no allies except other Tau, so they are cornered into a very one-dimensional list that I don't think anyone enjoys playing as or against. Hopefully GW helped the army out a bit, and we can start to see some real Tau armies instead of just commanders everywhere. Number 5. Raven Guard. Raven Guard are starting to be played a lot more because some of the people who want to play Imperial Marines don't want to feel forced into using Guilliman, and in an Ultramarine army, you kind of need to play Guilliman to stay relevant. Ultramarines can be played without him, but it would not be optimal. It would be like trying to make a Chaos list without Magnus or Morty. It can be done, but the more optimal list will always include the Primarchs. Raven Guard, however, can make it by without the need for Guilliman. They have access to some pretty good units, and with the -1 to hit them chapter tactic, they stand out pretty strong in the meta of gunlines. The only armies that don't struggle against this list are melee-based armies, since they don't care about the -1 to shoot. So if you want to play Marines but don't want to play Guilliman, Raven Guard is the way to go. Now, before we get into the top 4, here are some honorable mentions. Space Wolves, Officio Assassinorum, Imperial Knights, and Renegade Knights. The Space Wolf list wasn't available, so to those who wanted to see it, I apologize. And as a Space Wolf player myself, I would have loved to see it, but oh well. The Assassinorum list looked like a complete pain to play against. It was 12 of the Assassin you can only hit on 6s. To be honest, it looked really gimmicky, but hey, if you're into that sort of thing, then have fun. Just know that your opponent won't have any fun. And the Knights are always going to be around because they counter so many anti-infantry lists that seem to be filling the meta right now. With that said, let's get into the top 4 armies of October. Number 4. The boys are back in town. That's right, it's Orcs! It's about time Orcs have moved up to match their popularity with their tournament scores. They have always been a fan favorite and usually were looked at as the comic relief for 40k. I'm so glad they are getting their time to shine. And only with the index too. I can only see this army getting better when their codex releases, so I don't think they are going anywhere anytime soon. The armies consist of a lot of Storm Boys and just fill up the field and charge everything in existence. If you understand how to abuse pile-in moves and consolidating, this army would be amazing for you. They are great at tying up the entire enemy force for almost the entire game. So again, I'm glad the boys are back in town. Number 3. Ultramarines and Denarii. Both armies had an equal amount of showings in the top 3s, so it was only fair to include them at the same spot. I know this technically makes this a top 11 instead of top 10, but whatever, this was the easiest way for me to do this without getting the order all messed up. So Ultramarines have been doing pretty well with Guilliman in the lists, and have actually had a pretty diverse set of lists. This army has many variations that are all viable, it just depends on the meta and your playstyle. They obviously make a really good gun line because of Guilliman, so they can use any unit that can fit into that composition, such as Dreadnoughts, Forge World Dreadnoughts, Devastator Squads, Razorbacks, and so much more, but I don't want to go over all of them. Overall, it's still just a pretty solid army. As for the Denarii, they have been doing really well since the points reductions from the Craft Worlds Codex. They were doing well before, but that buff helped them out a lot. They recently were nerfed pretty hard though by the new FAQ, so I doubt we will actually be seeing any more pure Denarii lists in the future. I think they will still be popular in one detachment in Eldari lists, but I don't think we will see full armies of Denarii anymore. Number 2. Astra Militarum. Even before their codex arrived, this army has been doing well. Only now the way they are played is much different than before. The 3 main lists I've seen are full-on artillery, Torok spam, and Psyker spam. Although, like the Ultramarines, there are many different ways to efficiently play this army, and it always comes down to the meta you are playing in and your own personal playstyle. This leaves us with the number 1 army, Chaos. The ITC technically considers this army as 2 different armies, which would be Chaos Space Marines and Chaos Demons, but after looking at all the lists, I'm just going to call it Chaos. Every list had Chaos Space Marines, Demons, and Forge World in it, so it's not fair to divide them because of detachment size. So again, I'll just say Chaos when referring to these 2 armies. The army is still doing the same stuff it did in previous months, and like I predicted, Magnus and Morty is now a thing, and Tzeentch and Nurgle Demons and Alpha Legion are still the go-to to fill out the list. Malefic Lords are still a thing, but not nearly as bad as they once were. They seem to be slowly falling out of favor, at least taking more than 3 of them is. So that's it for the top 10 armies of October. The top 3 is the same as it has been since the beginning of 8th, but the rest of the list looks like it's constantly changing. And with the changes coming in December from Chapter Approved, who knows if those top 3 armies will still be the top 3 if they receive any nerfs. There's already a rumor going around that most of the Space Marine stuff is getting a points increase, so I don't know how true that is, but I wouldn't be surprised if they touched units from all of those top 3 armies, because no one wants the meta to become stale like 7th once was. So we'll just have to wait and see what GW wants to do with its game. Well anyways, thanks for watching the video, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, if you would like to help support the channel, you can do so by either becoming a Patreon to the channel by going to www.patreon.com/almostprogaming to pledge, or you can always just share my content with your friends or on any social media platform that you may use, such as any Facebook groups or Reddit. Anyways, again, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.